Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on someone who is coached by the great Laura Phelps and has just hit a new PR total at the Women's Pro-Am. Alex, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm Alex Donald. I've been competing, the 10 years now, 6 of which Laura's been coaching me. So still going strong. I've just turned 34 this past fall. So I've been doing this way longer than I initially expected to. I thought this was going to be, a couple year thing and, I'd find something else to do. But, the journey has been going 10 years. So still going strong. So just loving the process and having fun with it still. Ton of fun.
Yeah, so before we kind of get into what got you on the platform, we were kind of just talking about this before about how we were both at obviously she competed at the Women's Pro-Am and I was there, but I want to introduce myself, but I didn't want to bother her while she was competing. But if you saw her meet recap, she definitely had a great meet for herself.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, like we were talking about before, like you see so many people at a meet, and you might you're especially if you're competing or coaching or handling, like you're so sidetracked during the day. You're like, oh, I want to go say hi to this person, or oh, so and so's here. I need to make sure to say hi and thanks for coming. And then all of a sudden it's the end of the day, and deadlifts wrap up. You're exhausted. You're getting everything packed up, you're doing awards, and then all of a sudden everybody's gone. So
yeah, and with a meet like that where there's so many people come together to watch, like it's honestly one of the best meets in powerlifting. Everyone says it's the best women's meet, but in general, I would just say it's one of the best meets in powerlifting.
For sure, and I know I'm biased. It obviously is the best women's meet. I can think of maybe a couple other all women's meets, which is cool to see. But yeah, I would say I know I'm biased. It's my I've done it 6 times now, but the energy there is just unmatched, and to see not only women having just the best weekend of their life, but you guys too, men just seeing what it's all about too is really, really cool.
Yeah. And it definitely gives men a different perspective on powerlifting because almost in the powerlifting world, it seems like it's kind of flip flop when it comes to drama. Like men have more of the drama than women. Women are uplifting other women meanwhile men are arguing and fighting over stupid shit.
For sure. And coming from when I played basketball growing up, high school, college, all that. And I can definitely say there's a lot of catty girl sports. So I was hesitant to get into powerlifting because I was so burnt out. I had dedicated 15 years of my life to playing basketball. And once it was over, it was just something I felt like I had really nothing to show for it, even though I did a lot of really cool stuff. But a lot of the burnout was just cattiness, just unnecessary stuff, whether it's teammates, coaches, whatever. When I got into power, my first meet, I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. Anybody in the room, as long as you're on the platform, they're cheering for you.
Yeah.
They don't care who you are. If you're pulling the bar, if you're pulling 400, 500 pounds, everybody's cheering for you. So that's something that really, especially with it being an individual sport, you would think that there'd be more camaraderie around a team sport, but it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Everybody loves seeing everybody do something really cool, whether no matter what's on the bar. So I love that about it.
Yeah. And for me, I came from football. So it was kind of towards the end of my football career in college, I already started looking into powerlifting and I already kind of dipped my toes in it. But for you, was it something that kind of came out of the blue after college basketball, or is it something that you kind of saw yourself getting into?
It was about the same. I remember my college basketball coach made a joke that she could see, it was maybe my junior or senior year, she could see me doing either bodybuilding or powerlifting, and I just laughed at her. I was like, no way. I was like, I'm not into that. But I had always really loved lifting. I started lifting when I was in 8th grade by myself in my bedroom with a couple 5-pound dumbbells. I was really scrawny. I stopped growing. I've been 5'8" since I was 12 probably. And it was great when I was first playing because I was taller than everybody, and then everybody caught up to me and I was so skinny. And I was like, I need to get stronger. I was lifting pretty much freshman through senior year of high school. Beginning of it by myself in a YMCA. And then towards my junior and senior year of high school, I was lifting at school with all my guy friends were football players. So I was just a bunch of guys and me in the weight room. And I just like that. It wasn't like, oh, what's she doing in here? Nobody ever treated me weird. Like, I got a couple weird looks when I was at the Y by myself by some of the women that went there. But yeah, so I started liking that. And then once I was in college, we had, the weight room and everything. And that was just something that I hate to say, but I was already burnt out of basketball by my freshman year, but it was just engraved. That's what I did. Like, I remember like my dad one time told me in high school, he's like, your jobs are school and basketball. And so that was just engraved in my brain. I was like, I play basketball, whether I like it or not. And I always noticed that I had the most fun when we were lifting. My senior year of college, I actually ended up getting because we only had certain hours we could use the weight room at school.
Yeah.
I had a separate gym membership that I would go to, and I would go lift on my own. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my coach or anything. I was just lifting on my own because, it was an escape. I liked it. It was fun for me. So, but I kind of started like after my senior year was done, I was still in the weight room. I was doing more like bodybuilding style workouts, but like I never saw myself doing bodybuilding. And one of my friends had got me into it. We were Instagram friends, and I was benching like 185 as like, I was weighing 150, something like that. He was like, this is insane. I was like, I don't know, dude. I was like, I had never really squatted. We did box squats, actually. We did box squats. I would deadlift a little bit, but when I was in the weight room by myself, I was just benching. I was like, this is one thing I know how to do. So I had a really, really big bench compared to the rest of, my lifts. So he was like, he's like, I'll help you. He's like, we'll sign up for a first meet, see how you like it, whatever. And I was like, all right, we'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
And it was all history after that. I just fell in love with it.
I
just got it, really.
Yeah, and I know that nowadays there's so many meets every weekend and stuff. It's a lot easier to find a meet, and there's tons of meet directors where you can actually connect with them. But I know for you said your first meet was at a YMCA, so maybe tell us about how that experience was compared to like what it has gone up to now.
For sure. Well, so it seemed so normal at the time. Like we showed up to the meet. Actually, we mailed in our entry forms. So I didn't know anybody that was competing. We kind of had an idea. My first, maybe 5 years was USAPL. And that's the kid that got me into it. He was a USAPL lifter. So that's just what I did. And this was 2013. And compared to like the last couple of years I was in the USAPL and what I've seen since, it was so cool. But maybe I just, I didn't know much different. I was having a blast. I didn't know, much of the powerlifting drama. So, but yeah, we mailed in our entry forms and just showed up meet day. Weigh-ins were in like a locker room and everybody was all together. like we were all just huddled around a scale and they would call somebody's name. There was one platform. And then the warm-up room was like, it felt like a janitor's closet. It was so small. And we were, those rogue stand-up racks where they're not even connected at the base.
Like at the Olympic training camps and stuff?
Yes. Yeah, the Olympic racks. Yeah, like at CrossFit you would find. That was what we warmed up on. And the bar, I don't know what the bars were. I remember there being bumper plates, though. But to me, then that didn't matter. Like I was, because I was working out at a gym where we didn't have calibrated plates. At this point, I had no idea what calibrated plates were until I saw them that day. And I was like, oh, they're just colored. Like I didn't know anything about it, but compared to what I see now, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about that. Because there was no music. We all just sat out in the crowd. It was just like two areas, like two sections of a crowd, the platform, and then an empty YMCA. So
yeah,
it was pretty surreal.
And then as far as like kind of like a couple years down the road, like I feel like most powerlifters kind of at the 2 to 3 year mark is where they're like, all right, I'm going to keep doing this, or it's like, I'm going to try something else. So for you, when was that kind of moment they're like, all right, I'm going to stick with this and take it seriously?
Yeah. So I guess if 2013 was my first meet, I was still really young and I was still going out a lot, hanging with my friends, going out drinking every weekend. So it was, for me, I guess at that point, it was still just like something cool I was good at.
Yeah.
I was, I would do Raw Nationals every year. I would have blast there. But I wasn't like meddling or anything, but I was just kind of like, this is cool. Like, this is fun. I'm not, I'm just having fun with it. I would say it was about right kind of when I switched to Laura, when I was like, I really can do some cool stuff here. I remember my last Raw Nationals, I think was up in Chicago, maybe 2018. I became pretty close to medaling the last two. And I was in that 185 weight class. And then after that, it was super heavyweight. So I was getting to the point where I was cutting too much weight.
Yeah.
Like I was cutting. And, I kind of started exploring the USPA a little bit, the other weight classes. The main event project was kind of getting started up around then because I was trained at Sweatshop, and so I knew Leah. And so the main event project was getting started, and they were talking about more weight classes. And, I started just kind of really looking around on open powerlifting and, learning a little bit about a deadlift bar and talking to Laura. And so I would say it was really right before COVID. I was honestly like 5, 6 years in that I was like, all right, we're going to take it to like the next level. The guy that coached me, Eric Kenry, he lives down in Florida. He was my coach for about 4 years or so. And he was really, really great. And I was getting to the point where I needed a little bit more, and I could tell he was kind of shifting. They had just had their second kid, him and his wife. So they were kind of shifting towards doing something else. And so I was terrified to tell him I wanted to switch to Laura.
Yeah.
But we had the conversation. He's like, dude, I'm so glad you did this first. And I just need more. I was like, it's nothing you've done. I was like, I just, I needed more. I, went up to the 198 weight class, started learning under Laura with the conjugate method and everything. And so that was about when I was like, all right, let's really do this.
Yeah. So before we dive into that, I remember me and Amber talked a little bit at the main event project, but something that I didn't ask, but like, I guess during that time period when it was being set up to kind of expand the weight classes, like what was not the culture, but like the environment of kind of women's powerlifting at that time?
Yeah, because it was I know the USPA had the 198 weight class, but then after that it was super heavyweight. So it was, I feel like a lot of women at least that kind of hung out in that 198 or 185 weight class. I know the USAPL has expanded since, and I think that was probably inspired by the rest of the weight classes. I know we just kind of felt stuck in a weight class. We didn't want to go up to a super heavyweight because when I was in the USAPL, I'm not competing against Bonica Brown, dude. Like she's a monster.
Yeah.
And we don't belong in the same weight class. So that was, I think, a big part of it. That was like, there are a lot of women that are over, 5'8", 5'9", 5'10". Leah's a couple inches taller than me. We can't, like, if we want to get stronger, we want to get bigger, we can't keep starving ourselves. So that was kind of it. I was just trying to show that there were a lot of women that would make these weight classes make sense.
Yeah. And do you think that the expansion of the weight classes allowed a lot of women like yourself who were kind of trying to cut to that 198 that allowed themselves to grow into the 220 or the 242 to where the total started going crazy?
Yep. Yeah. And I think the 220 weight class still is a little uncharted right now. I mean, the world record for the 220 weight class is insane because Sarah Rainbow.
Yeah, she's insane.
1,700.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty crazy. And I know that she's had a meet where maybe she came close to that too, but just didn't want to cut the couple pounds. And so her world record is in the 242 weight class. But I think that's cool to just have that because you look at how many weight classes the men have. And, while that pool is smaller, it's not saying that there can't be more things that happen in the future in those weight classes. And I think that was the biggest thing that the main event project was trying to prove. It's like, there's like powerlifting is going to, it's going to go on forever. Like, and you've seen all of these, the one USAPL girl that just squatted 700 pounds.
Insane.
She's a super heavyweight too. So it's like, if we see all of these women lifting these big weights, breaking these records, like it gives more inspiration to expand those weight classes. I'm glad they did.
Yeah. And then as far as training goes with Laura, for the terms of conjugate method, obviously that's something that she's very passionate about. She did herself. And it's something that if you're in the world of powerlifting, like I could safely say that almost everyone in the top 10 of every weight class probably trains that in some sort of passion or some sort of fashion. So for you, was it more, were you looking for someone to train conjugate for, or is it more something that you looked for Laura and then you discovered that through?
Yeah, mostly I looked for Laura and I said, I'm open to whatever. So I mostly just did like a progressive overload type, like 5-3-1 type of program before. But it was about 2018 when I started going to Sweatshop. And we were my old gym had closed, and my best friend knew some people that knew Laura, that were coached by Laura. And they were like, hey, if you guys, our old gym was supposed to reopen back up. So we were supposed to it was supposed to be a temporary thing. She's like, yeah, stay here as long as you want. Like, this is kind of how we train. This is, showed us everything. She was like, stay here as long as you want until your new gym opens up. And that never opened up. So, and we never left. So, but I was still doing my own thing while I was there the first year or so. But I started becoming friends with all the girls that Laura trained, like Leah, Grace, all of them. And I started watching what they were doing because my accessories love Eric to death, but my accessories were boring.
Yeah.
Like he gave me, but I do appreciate that he gave me the freedom to do what accessories I needed. My program would be, it would be like horizontal movement, vertical movement, tricep movement. And some days I was like, dude, what? And so I was, I did get stuck doing, tricep movement. All right, let's do some push downs. Okay. Vertical row, let's do some lat pull downs. And that's where I was like, I'm not progressing on this. Like, I'm just doing the same thing over and over. So I started watching what the girls were doing. I was like, oh, what's a JM press? What are you guys doing against bands? What's all this stuff? I remember one time Leah just noticing me. I was doing like some shrugs or like rounded back with the SSB. I saw her from across the gym point at me and be like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm trying to get stronger, dude. I was like, I see, because we really push our accessories. And that's like the big beat of the program. So I started throwing in some accessories, and it was around that time that I knew it was time to switch. So, it's hard not to notice the success that all of Laura's athletes have. So I just went to her, I was like, let's do this. And the one thing I'll always appreciate is that she said, I know you've been training for a while. You're not new to this. She's like, if there is anything you don't like or you don't feel like works for you, come to me first and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I was sold right there. I was sold before.
Yeah.
Because I knew Laura. We were friends. I was part of the training group. I was just doing my own thing. But when she said that, I was like, okay, cool. Because it was a big change from what I was doing to doing Conjugate.
Yeah, and this is kind of a good segue to talk about the myth of that Conjugate doesn't work for all lifters, something that I thought was something that didn't exist anymore, but there's still some people out there that believe that. Like I said a few minutes ago, like almost everyone in the top percent of every weight class, every division, like if you're from the US mostly, or even Russia, and it works. It clearly works, and there's so much evidence that it works that it blows my mind that people think it only works for geared lifters.
Yep. It's funny because I haven't really been hearing that much anymore. But when I first, because I went from doing USAPL to boom, Laura Phelps was my coach, and I'm doing Conjugate.
Completely different.
There was a little bit of feedback there from some people I was, like that, not maybe that I was casual friends with that, I would see at meets, and, we follow each other on Instagram. So there was a little bit of kickback from that, but I haven't heard it a lot lately. Kind of miss it.
Yeah, and it's funny though, because you see, like, I don't know, one of our friends posts a video, and it's like, I don't know, like a circuit match or something. They're like, why not just put more weight? Why are you using these band and chains? It's like, dude, look up accommodating resistance. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
Exactly. I think there's so many resources out there now that debunks all of these people's like, well, why don't you just add weight instead of all those chains at the bottom? Like, dude, if it'd be a lot easier to load.
Yeah.
For sure. like I hate loading chains.
Yeah.
Especially on a squat. But there's so much info out there now, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all that. Like, there is so much that debunks that. I think what people, and a lot of people are like, well, I did Conjugate when I first started. Yeah, you went on like a website, you picked your accessory, you picked your max efforts that you wanted to do. You didn't pick the things that you needed to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big difference is that, and I'm glad that when I started, I had a coach that put it all out there for me. She'd watch my lifting. She knew what I needed. And, she continues to program things that I need. Everybody likes doing the stuff that's fun.
Yeah. And it's almost like with Conjugate, one of my favorite things about Conjugate is it's so hard to get burnt out from it. I mean, your CNS gets fried, but in terms of being bored, like you could basically create a variation and not do the same variation in like 3 years. Yeah,
exactly. There are some variations I come back to that I'm like, I have a Google sheet with all of my like max PRs. And I'm like, God, when was the last time I did that? Like yesterday, I did a Zercher squat with an axle bar for like a 3x10, nothing like max effort, just kind of getting back in the flow. But I was like, damn, I haven't done a Zercher squat in forever. So, and it's cool to see too, because you're like, oh, like I haven't done this in a year. Let's see where I'm at.
Yeah.
So it's nice to track progress like that versus just, oh, my squat went up 5 pounds, my bench went up 5 pounds. It's like, okay. Like, especially during meet prep too, most of our movements are always the same. So I can compare what I did, this coming prep to last prep. And, if I'm hitting, 5 pound PRs, I think I'm in a good place or matching whatever.
Yeah. And another thing with the variations too, is like some people are good against AR, some people aren't. And like, it also like, it's harder to set goal. Like you obviously set goals, like maybe like if you're taking a circuit match, you're like, well, I want to have 600 on the bar, but like it doesn't mean anything necessarily. So you don't get caught up in the mental game of, oh, well, I missed what's supposed to be my second attempt this meet. This meet's going to go to shit now.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people get caught up too with the AR and they're like, if they have 400 pounds on the bar and they're squatting against, say, lights, which could add about 100 pounds, they'll be like, oh, I squatted 500 today. I'm like,
No.
you squatted 400, but it was against 100 pounds of resistance, which is different. So I see that with like new conjugate lifters too, that are like, oh, I did 500 today. It's like, just 500 at the top. And I think I think at least having a guide of understanding AR and like what it is at the bottom, what it is at the top, and what that means for your meet, because somebody might just go hop in a prep or like a meet and attempt 500 on their opener because they did it easy. That was the top load of their band. So I can see it's definitely, it takes its understanding. And I think a lot of the misconception of conjugate doesn't work for raw is that misunderstanding of it. It's like, oh, I didn't progress. And, because I didn't understand how much the bands add, how much they take off, what the benefit is, how much the chain, what the benefit of the chains is. And I was doing, like people just say, doing the accessories and the main movements they want to, not the stuff that's hard.
Yeah, and then as far as meet prep goes, I know last year you said you had adductor injury going into the 2024 Women's Pro-Am, and
Yep.
Most people in the top level of sport, they always come back from setbacks. They get setbacks. It's just part of the sport. So I like to always hear kind of how each individual athlete kind of goes through that mentally and physically, and just how long it took them to come back from that.
Yeah, it was a hard one. I've gotten very, very lucky that was probably my first injury. And I got lucky that I think it was a grade 1 adductor strain. But it was smack right in the middle of meet prep. I remember doing it. I was doing some deadlift volume, and I felt like I felt like I had a cramp in my adductor. I didn't know what was going on. But I made the smart decision. I just shut it down for the day. I was like, this doesn't feel good. Let me do some mobility. Something didn't feel good, but it didn't hurt. It kind of just felt like a cramp. Did a bunch of mobility stretching, over the weekend, and I felt great Monday. I was like, all right. And I had my squat opener, my second that day, and everything felt great. I had no loss of range of motion or anything. I really didn't feel anything, but then I started feeling it about when I did my opener and my second, and the next day I could barely walk.
Yeah.
Actually, that night I could barely walk. I remember having to like text my neighbor and be like, hey, dude, I don't have any like elite. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I was like, I don't have any medicine. I was like, do you have anything? Like, she works at a hospital. She's like, yeah. She's like, I'll come over. And then I went and saw my PT the next day and then talked to Laura, and like, I'm lucky that it wasn't like torn or anything, but it definitely was not ideal. But as I told Laura, I was like, what do we do? Like, do I pull out? Do I just do bench only? Like, what's going on? She's like, we have a ton of time. It was probably about 6 weeks out.
Yeah.
But I had to completely stop squatting and pulling basically the rest of prep, about 3 or 4 weeks. And all I did was drag a sled. I would just get my sled, go drag it down the street that our gym is on and back, just to maintain some strength. And then, I was seeing my PT and everything. I was doing a lot of mobility stuff. My friend Sarah Buckley she's got the Conjugate mobility that she coaches. She helped me out with that too. And then it was about 2 weeks out that I finally took my last squat and deadlift, and still made it to the meet. I ended up grinding out a 5-pound squat PR, which was not pretty. And then I missed my third deadlift, which I wasn't surprised. I really hadn't, and I had to pull so narrow, almost like a front stance, and it felt fine up until my second, but I got to my third, and like it was, that close stance just didn't feel good. But then after that, it was like, I think literally the next that night I messaged Sarah. I was like, let's get on this. Like, let's like, I want to work with you and I want to fix this. So we've worked since last pro-am prep basically on mobility, like treating the adductor, and then anything else that kind of comes with it too, because it's not usually just the adductor. Yep. It's, an issue you have with a glute, or, your hips aren't, like my internal rotation was awful. And I think if my internal rotation was so bad that it was putting a lot of strain on my adductor.
Yeah. And I think one of the key takeaways from this is what kind of separates like a professional versus a rookie is being able to be like, hey, I don't have to pull out of this meet, but I also don't have to push it. I can take 4 weeks off and still maintain strength and still hit a PR like you did in the meet. Like, meanwhile, rookies will go into it being like, they'll either drop the meet or they'll keep pushing it and then they'll completely blow it off and then they're done powerlifting.
Yeah, I think that if that had happened when I was younger in this, I don't know if I'd still be doing this. So I'm glad that I've got very lucky that, I've been smart too about attempt selection and all that and what I'm doing in the gym. So really lucky that it wasn't as bad as it was. And that was really kind of my first injury. and I did a meet in September. It still lingered a little bit, and it actually ended up flaring up again during the meet. Like on my second attempt squat, I did that meet in sleeves, and it started flaring up on my second attempt squat, and I was just like, I have to get through the day.
Yeah.
Like I ended up getting my second and third squat fine. Bench felt fine, but then by deadlift, I was like, I know I've got maybe like 8 pulls in me. Like warm-ups and on the platform, I was like, let's just go 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plate, 4 plate. I hit my opener, and it was starting to bother me. And so I looked at Laura. I was like, we got to go to my third attempt now.
Yeah.
I was like, we just got to get there. I was like, I know I for sure have 1 more pull in me, but I was like, it's starting to bother me. And so then I ended up skipping to my third attempt, and then it moved fine. And of course, I'm going to take second attempt. Of course, I'm going to take a third attempt.
Yeah.
Like, because it moved good. And that's when that was the first time I attempted the deadlift, that 220 record. I think we used kilos at that meet, so I had to try to pull 606.
Yeah.
It came off the ground. Like I just wasn't ready for it. But I wasn't gonna not take that opportunity, because you just never know what happens on meet day.
100%. And I think that's kind of that's kind of the flip side of it too. Of like, look, there's a certain point in powerlifting, like honestly, it's probably after the first year, where nothing's gonna feel great ever again until you retire and rehab it and just quit the sport. So you have to find that balance of like, where do I push it? Where do I find that line to take a step back? And most of us are on the side of fuck it. If it blows, it blows. So
yeah, at this point, you've gone, been in the sport for so long, like, and I was like, I'm not gonna not attempt it, but I'm also not gonna risk further injury. Like I wasn't gonna grind the hell out of it and tear everything in that adductor just to, maybe get it, maybe not. So it came off the ground, and I was like, this is not happening today. But I wasn't gonna not take the opportunity to do it. So after that, Sarah and I got back to work, and it took probably a good year. And I wouldn't say that it was hurt all year. It was just feeling more comfortable, and adding in the thing, doing the little stuff, doing mobility at home after I get home from the gym while I'm watching TV or something like that. Making sure I'm warming up properly, doing, the accessories that I need to do and the rehab work that I need to do every single day. So,
yeah. All the boring stuff is what adds up to the fun stuff.
Yeah, it's boring. I don't like doing it, but I need to, and I feel better the next day. So
yeah, but I guess as far as the fun parts of powerlifting, I know you said you had a story about a meet with Amy Weisberger there. If you want to tell us that story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody knows Amy.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a woman in the sport, if you don't know it, I won't be like, you should know who Amy is. Like, I know there are a lot of young women in the sport that probably have no idea who Amy is, but if anybody doesn't know Amy, just look her up. She's a legend, and she's a big reason, her and Laura, big reason why women can do what they do today in powerlifting, and that we have these opportunities. But Amy trained with us she's trained at Sweatshop Westside. I think she's up at Elite FTS now. She's just kind of popped around because I think she lives in Columbus, and she pops around gym to gym, just helping where it's needed. But she trained with us at Sweatshop, and I think it was her last Pro-Am that she did. It was kind of when I first started training there, but we've been there for a good year. And it was amateur day of the Pro-Am, and we're all outside. It's really nice. It's between like bench and deadlift or something. And Laura had just posted the flights for Pro Day. And there's a big group of us from the Sweatshop that are all looking at the flights for the next day. And Amy just appears out of nowhere. Nothing on her, just her person. And she comes up to us and she goes, "Oh, are those the flights for tomorrow?" And we're like, "Yeah, Laura just posted them." She goes, "Could you let me know what flight I'm in? My name is Amy Weisberger." And we looked at her like, "Amy, we all train at the same gym. We know who you are." And that just, I mean, that's a whole other thing, is that just shows how humble she is. Like, she doesn't assume that she walks into a building, she assumes nobody knows who she is. And Laura is the same way. When she goes to, she went to the American Pro, she's like, "How do these people know who I am?" I'm like, "Laura, people know who you are." But yeah, Amy was like, "My name is Amy Weisberger. Could you find me on the list?" We're like, "Yeah, Amy, we can find you." So we found her flight and everything. And then after that, she just walked away and disappeared into like the woods. We had no idea. Like, I don't know where she came from, how she got home, but she goes, "Okay," and then just turns around and walks away.
Yeah. So the funny story about Amy was when last year me and Joe Rupo, we went to the Pro-Am for one of our athletes who's no longer at our gym, but that's a whole different story. But so we wanted, he had to get, I think he had to take like his opener and a bench shirt or something. We went to sweatshop. Like it was like me and one other person and his wife, and like we were trying to make it happen, and he forgot his shirt, and it was kind of just a nightmare. And we pulled
Yeah.
into the parking lot, and we saw someone pull out, and I was like, that lady looks super familiar. And then she comes back and she hops out, and we're like, who is she? And then John goes, I know who it is. That's Amy Weisberger. I was like, no fucking way. She's like,
Yeah.
just like you said, the most humble, like non-assuming
She's
person
walking
ever,
around.
and she was
Yeah.
just an absolute badass of a lifter.
She's an absolute legend. It's just, I one time went down a rabbit hole of looking at her open powerlifting. Dude, it's insane. Like it just, I kept scrolling and scrolling, and I would like zoom in on the dates, and I was like, she did like 3 meets within 3 months one time or something like that. I was like, but it was like in the 90s and 80s. Like some of this stuff happened before I was even born. So if you ever have a chance to look at Amy's, just enjoy scrolling through it all. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and for another thing from her too is that like she was able to compete so many times and so long, and that's something that I've mentioned before. Like this, it's a big shift in the sport where there's so many people able to compete longer and increase their totals late into their 40s. Like perfect example is Donnie Thompson hitting his 3,000 total at I think he was 47. Like that's something like 30, 40 years ago you wouldn't even think of someone at that age lifting.
Yeah. People that don't know a ton about the sport are like, you're still doing this? They're like, is it like, I'm like, yeah, I'm sore and tired. Like, of course, I don't feel like I did when I was in my 20s when I played basketball. But like, yeah, it's still very doable. I mean, you look at it, there's a ton of women that, and they say that women peak in like their mid to late 30s. And once you kind of explain like, the estrogen drop that just happens naturally, people are like, oh yeah, you're right. But it's not just that. There's a ton of people, as long as you can find ways to stay healthy and take care of your body outside of the gym, honestly, you can do it as long as you want to.
Yeah. So for you, what are some of the things that have helped you kind of maintain yourself and just, I mean, if you look at your open powerlifting, you've increased your total at almost every single meet you've done. And that's something that honestly, a lot of people don't get away with. So
yeah, I think there's maybe only two or three like that I didn't. And I look at it and I'm like, okay, the last one was the Pro-Am when I was, I had the adductor thing. I had a meet in Louisville one time that I had to move the week of the meet, and the deadlifts did not go so hot. But yeah, so it's like, I look and I'm like, all right, what went wrong here? It's like a whole ordeal. But yeah, it's after that adductor thing, I kind of started having, I don't know if it was maybe part of like post-meet blues that you get. Especially missing my third deadlift at the Pro-Am last year, missing my third deadlift at Surge, that one I did in September. Yeah, you start to get the blues, because who doesn't love going 9 for 9 and hitting a huge PR on everything? But I've done that a lot, but I've had to learn that like it's not always going to be like that, especially when you're pushing some big numbers. And I've had to learn that the last couple of years. But really, the big thing that got me through that, because I started wondering, I'm like, God, how much longer am I going to be able to do this? The adductor injury, started bothering me. I was like, I don't want to be crippled for the rest of my life. I'm like, but once I got that, all healed and everything and started feeling better, honestly, just taking care of my body has been the biggest thing. I even recently, like a couple weeks ago, started doing some like really low impact yoga just to like feel better and move better as a human, because, people always say that powerlifters can't move very well and we're all fat, but like, there is a difference between that rumor and also being able to move pretty well. So I've started taking that a lot seriously, doing, making sure like my conditioning is on point too, without taxing without ruining a training day. Like I'm not going to go run 10 miles, but I'll take my sled out and I'll do a loop around my neighborhood. Takes, 10, 15 minutes or so. So that's really been the biggest thing for longevity with me, is just taking care of my body, eating right, drinking a bunch of water, avoiding the stuff that I don't need to be doing. Like, can't tell you the last time I had a drink.
Yeah. And that's something for me too. That's something that I definitely switched to, because you can ask John, when I first started coming to Evolve on Sundays, I was still in college. I was in a frat. So I'd show up Sunday morning hungover, sometimes still drunk, and would be squatting. And ever since I kind of stopped doing that, like everything's just gone through the roof. So,
me too. Yeah, I mean, when I played basketball, I can't tell you how many practices and games I was hungover.
Yeah.
I felt invincible, because you're 21, you're 22. Like, you don't need that much sleep. You can bounce back pretty quick. So the beginning of powerlifting, I did, I wouldn't go to the gym hungover. But I would go out every Saturday night because that's what I did. And I got to the point around, like that 2018, right before I switched to Laura, and I was like, I had already kind of been like, this isn't for me anymore. Like, I'm like, I feel like shit on Mondays, even on going out on Saturdays. I felt like my training was not going well on Monday. So I was like, hey, I'm going to save a ton of money.
Yeah.
As I'm not buying drinks, I'm not buying Taco Bell or McDonald's afterwards. And I felt, it played a huge role. Like, I wasn't that college kid anymore. I couldn't just bounce back like that. And it really does take a huge, a hit on your training.
100%. And do you have any other hobbies outside of powerlifting?
Yeah. I really, honestly, coming from basketball, I still watch a lot of college basketball. My dad and I go to Xavier University. He went there. So we have season tickets there. Laura and I actually split season tickets to the Bengals. So I like baseball too. So going to sports games. I've got 2 dogs that keep me pretty busy. Outside of work and all that though, just trying to keep myself busy, just stay outside a little bit. I like to travel. I've got family out in Seattle, so I go out there a lot. I have family up in Maine, so I like to see some cool stuff in the world. Not very outdoorsy, but I like to see things from a car.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason I asked that is because I think that's another huge overlooked part of longevity is having something else, having another outlet. Yeah. Like if tomorrow was your last day training, what would you do with your life? So I think the reason I asked that is there's so many people that have this all-in mentality or like, this is my life, that when it comes time to hang them up or you go through a setback, you don't see other options and you spiral.
Yep. I experienced that with basketball because it was my job. It was all I did. I played D3 college basketball, but I can't say it was any different than D1. It was just who we were playing against. It was the size of the school. Like we were held to the same standards. And it was, it burnt me out. It's like, because you're playing, even when I was in high school, I ran track, I did basketball and soccer. I never had an off season. During the summer, I was playing summer ball. We were in, a different state every weekend. I was getting ready for soccer and it just rolled around. There was never a break. So I think it's really important to have, even if just like 1 or 2 weird things.
Yeah.
If you like, anime, if you like whatever, it doesn't even have to be like active or anything. Just have another hobby outside of lifting because like your powerlifting career could go away at any second.
Yeah, and it's funny
or something.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned like the D3. Like you're so right with it because I did football and wrestling, and there was literally no off season. And during football, it's a 40-hour work week. There's meetings before practice. There's meetings after games. There's the games. There's practice 3 hours a night. It's a lot of people think, oh, D3, D2. It's not. You're just not as good, but it's still the same commitment. It's a different skill level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just the size of the school, really, and the level of play. Like we couldn't have competed with the D1 school, but maybe the smaller ones probably. But yeah, you're going to class. You're on a road trip. Most of our road trips were 3-hour trips, there and back. And we get back at midnight. If you played like shit, you're practicing at 5 a.m. the next day because you were in trouble.
Yeah.
So it is a full-time job.
Yeah, especially when like both of us where we kind of started getting into that powerlifting towards the end when you're trying to mix that in there too because during the season you're training 3 days a week, but you're like, well, I need to do this extra day and then my back and bicep day, and then all of a sudden you have no free time for anything.
Yeah, that was Sundays for me. We usually played on Saturdays. We'd go out, get hammered, sleep in, and then Sunday I would go to the gym and work on some stuff, just try to get stronger, and then by then it's Monday. So yeah, it's like having an adult job.
Yeah. So I guess back to powerlifting for you, what's kind of next in the cards for you?
Yeah, so I signed up for Queen of the Platform down in December. Jordan Wong's running that out of his gym down in Northport. They announced it in the middle of Pro-Am prep, and I kind of didn't really have a plan for. It was still when the adductor thing was bothering. I was like, dude, should I take the rest of the year off and just really dig down into an off season and just not compete, or find a really small local meet? But they announced that meet, and they announced they were using the Kabuki bar, which I really enjoy pulling with. I know WRPF banned it. I don't know, USPA is probably going to follow suit and all that, but Jordan put it out there. He's like, hey, we're using Kabuki bar. And I was like, shit. I was like, all right, December. I was like, that gives me a ton of time. And I started talking about it with Laura. I was like, hey, I was like, kind of thinking about this. I know we're in the middle of pro am prep. I was like, so I don't want to, I want to focus on what our job is now. I was like, but I'll keep an eye on the roster and then I'll sign up like after the pro am, or if it starts to fill up, I'll throw my name in there. And the next day I looked at the roster and Christy Hawkins had signed up and Samantha Rice did.
Oh,
And
yeah.
all of a sudden I'm in that Google form, just filling it out and sending money. I said, Laura, I'm like, hey, I know yesterday I said I was going to wait, but I was like, Christy Hawkins and Sam Rice just signed up for this meet. I was like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
So,
And they're two people that I'd love to get on at some point. Just,
yeah,
sometimes hard to reach out to some people, but
I've never talked to Christy or anything, but I competed against Sam in Kansas City a couple of years ago. She out-totaled me. So when I was still 198, she out-totaled me by like 200 or 300 pounds, but it was still really, she's very, very nice. It was cool to meet her, and we've kind of kept tabs on each other and kept an eye on each other's stuff ever since then.
So as far as, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here with the deadlift bar. Obviously the kabuki bar has its advantages, especially if you know how to use it. You're getting more pounds out of it. We can all admit that. So I know some people are very against it, and obviously when it kind of comes to world records and things like that, I'm kind of leaning towards the side of it maybe illegitimifies the records if someone pulls down a power and stuff. So I kind of want to hear your opinions on that.
For sure. So I mean, yeah, like if you know how to use that bar, yeah, you can get more pounds out of it. I ended up buying one a couple of years ago because that meet I did in Kansas City was the first one I was going to do. And I was like, I want to get used to this bar because we pulled with Texas bars. And I got in, I was like, oh wow, yeah, it's a lot different. If you are somebody who if you're a conventional puller, it might not be a great bar for you, unless you can figure it out. Obviously John Hack pulls with it just fine. But if you were a grip and ripper, don't sign up for it. You'll regret it because it'll come off the floor really fast, but that whip will hit you around your knees and you will struggle after that. But if you can wedge well and all that, you can get a lot out of it. I would say, I don't know, I probably get about an extra maybe 5-10 pounds out of it. It just, and I'm, when they started banning it, I was like, I can pull the same with the Texas bar. It just feels a little bit better the way I pull with the kabuki bar. But I will say there are some world records that have gotten inflated. You see Dan Grigsby pulling over 1,000 pounds with it. But I've actually kind of kept an eye on his training because he started pulling with the Texas bar, and he's kind of been like right back where he was with the kabuki bar, and he's kind of been like, it's been cool watching his training. He's kind of documenting like, hey, this is what I pulled with the kabuki bar for 500 kilos for X whatever he's pulling at, which is insane. And he'll compare it and he'll kind of like note his experience, which is cool because at the end of the day, you should be able to pull, outside of a power bar. If you're pulling with a deadlift bar, it shouldn't matter what it is. Obviously, if you have the time and resources to use the bar you're going to use at a meet, great, but it's not going to make or break, anything. But I do like the Sportcraft bar that we used at the Pro-Am. I would say that's a really middle ground between the Texas bar and the kabuki bar.
See, I kind of agree, but at the same time, I don't know what it is with that bar, but I absolutely hate it.
The Sportcraft one?
Yeah, I love FA's new deadlift bar because it's that same middle ground between the Texas and the kabuki, but the knurling's so much better, and I don't know, something with that Sportcraft bar, I never set right with
I noticed
me.
the F8 deadlift bar, actually the knurling is wider out.
Yeah.
It's not as close. Because I think we used that north of the border at Leah's meet. We used one and I was looking at it. It's it's at our gym in the back. And I was looking at the knurling. I was like, it's further out, so you'd be gripping it almost, not like a snatch grip, but it would be a further out grip. Or if you kept your grip, you would at least 1 or 2 fingers might be on the smooth part. So I thought that was interesting about it. I've not used the F8 deadlift bar, but we just used that Sportcraft one. And I've used the kabuki in Texas.
Yeah. So I guess before we kind of wrap things up, let's talk about your third attempt at the Pro-Am this year. I think, honestly, it's in my powerlifting career, it might have been my favorite attempt to watch in all the sport. And I think I
appreciate that.
It was just an insane grind. It was like literally a half a second from a down command. It was crazy.
It was. I could not see anything while I was doing that. I was watching, I think Bingham was the head judge. All I could see was like a white hand. All I was looking at was her hand. I think I don't remember, it's not on film or anything from that angle, but I do recall seeing her hand go down, and it's right when I was up at the top. and I was squeezing my butt so hard that actually, and I was able to see it in a video, my toes come up.
Yeah.
And I've never had that happen where I fly backwards before or anything. It was just one hell of a grind. Like and 605, it was the right attempt to go for.
100%.
What was I going to go for 595? And
Yeah.
then, and I knew I did have the option of a fourth attempt. That's just so hard to do. You got what, 10 minutes maybe in between? Because I knew that Dina and Taylor were pulling after me.
Yep.
Because we were all like, I think Taylor had 610.
Yep.
Dina had something over 6.
And like 615.
Yeah, 615. So it was like back to back to back.
Yeah.
And, I kind of thought during prep, I was like, I need to maybe be prepared for a fourth attempt. But I had got that 580 felt great.
Yeah.
It moved great as it should. And I looked at Laura and I was like 605 is the record. I was like, if you're okay with it, I want it. I was like, I'm not messing around with a third attempt and then a fourth attempt. Because then, what was I going to go for on a third attempt? It was either going to be 595 and then do a fourth attempt at 605 or 600 and be 5 pounds away from a world record.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call there, but I was like, we got to do it.
Yeah. And not only was that attempt insane, honestly, those last like 4 attempts of the day, because you guys were all killing deadlifts, and then those last like 4 attempts of the day were all like perfect attempts, RPE 10. It was just so hard to watch.
Yeah. It was hard because I watched Taylor's. Yeah, I had enough time to get around to watch Taylor's from the middle of the crowd. And then I didn't get to see Dina's, but yeah, those were all perfect attempts. They were all there. Yeah, I was just a split second away. And I don't know. I had asked Katie, one of the side judges, Katie Brent, what her call was, but it was like an hour after it. And I was like, I'm not mad. Like I know I didn't get the lift. I did get a white from the front.
Yeah.
So, but she shouldn't be judging the side anyways. Like, so I kind of asked her what her call was. And so I've slowed down the video a couple times and looked, and I don't know if there was a little bit of downward motion at all, but, and while I was doing it, I was like, I knew it was sketchy, but I was like, I'm not pulling this. Like, I'm not going to quit halfway.
Yeah.
Like, cause at the end of the day, still pulled 605.
Exactly.
It's just, I tipped backward and, didn't get it. So I think that Donna did me a white because I did start to get the down command. It was just the sides.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, if one of the sides would have given me a white, just being like, oh, well, it looked, if one side maybe wasn't downward movement, I don't know that I would have wanted that to be my first world record. I think there may have been a little bit of kickback from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things with world records like that. You do want to make them clean because you know how dear that be.
Yeah. I mean, I fought like hell. I'm glad I did it. I don't, I'm not mad about it. Like, that was sick. It was one of the coolest things. And especially it just shows me how far I came from September, which I was not ready for 606. And then 2 weeks ago, 605 is right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was the right call. It's still a cool gym PR. Like, I can say, hey, I've pulled 605 before. But
exactly.
I just didn't clean it up. So
Yeah.
it'll be there. I think December will be really cool because, we'll see Sam pulls over 6, Christy pulls over 6. And I'm like, I know there's a lot of money in this meet, and I don't go there. I don't go there for the money for those, but I'm like, if I could pull 600 on the same platform with Sam and Christy, that'd be pretty cool to say I did, whether it's a world record or not.
Yeah,
you can't control. If anybody else grabs it, good for them.
Yeah,
But
I
world
definitely
records
think you'll smoke it when it comes to that because, I mean, we already saw you could do it, but I think we can wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would it be?
Oh, man. First and foremost, a quick one, don't cut weight because I did it. And just enjoy the process. Like, it's not like longevity is obviously a big thing that I am pretty proud of and that I've been able to do for so long. Enjoy the moment, take as much advice as you can. Don't I guess, take constructive criticism in a bad way. People are just trying to help you. There are some people that are going to come and say some crappy stuff and be like, oh, I don't like the way you bench or whatever. But when you find good people that just want to help you, take all the help you can get because there's so much knowledge outside of the internet and just talking to people like, people like Amy, people like Laura, who have been here for a long time that, the internet wasn't around really, at least it was around, but they weren't using it as much back when they were competing. So just soak it all up and just take it as much as you can. And, don't be afraid to take risks too.
Definitely. I think
there's always a time and place.
Exactly. I think taking risks, a calculated risk is a very fun part of the sport, especially like when it comes to a third attempt deadlift. So
Yeah, it's something I've kind of had to learn recently because I was pretty notorious for going 9 for 9, very conservative for a while. But the last couple meets, I'm like, let's just like, you never know when this is going to be over. And those two, that 606 and that 605, I'm like, I will always be glad I attempted it and gave it my shot. Whether it'll be mine one day or whether somebody else grabs it is fine, but I'll never regret that. So there's always a time and place to you know, take a swing at it.
yeah,
Why not?
100%. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, dude, thank you. This is awesome.
Sweet.